Crash at last year's Singapore Grand Prix to help his teammate Fernando Alonso. Alonso then went on to win the race. Renault deny the claims. It was 8 years ago today that the blue skies of New York were filled with smoke and terror as hijacked planes were flown into the Twin Towers, as well as the Pentagon in Washington and a field in Philadelphia. In total, nearly 3,000 people died. Relatives and friends are now gathering in New York ahead of a series of ceremonies to mark the day in the very bad weather, it seems, in New York there. But they will be there to remember all their loved ones who perished that day. Many more, though, of course, have died since then as a direct result of those attacks, as we became embroiled in the so-called war on terror. Just 2 months later, British troops were sent to Afghanistan, and of course, they're still there. Today, a new ITV News poll reveals what you think about Britain's continued involvement. Out of just over 1,000 people, only half thought the British Army's presence in Afghanistan reduced the threat of terrorism on our streets. Just over a quarter agreed that it did, but didn't think that it justified the British deaths there. And less than 1 in 5 said it partly justified the loss of British personnel. Well, our international editor Bill Neely covered those attacks in New York and is, once again, in Afghanistan today for us. He spoke to some American soldiers who told him what they thought about the conflict.
Well, here this morning, hundreds of American soldiers remembered the dead of September the 11th with bowed heads, with a minute's silence and with speeches at a ceremony. One American soldier even openly saying he was sceptical about the war that followed September the 11th. It's hard, he said, not to ask the question, is it worth it? It's certainly, he said, a question that's worth asking. One answer that's clear to me, and I've been with these American troops for the last 10 days, that when you ask them, does September the 11th still motivate you today? The answer almost universally is yes, from the 2 young soldiers, both boys at the time of the attacks, who said they joined up deliberately after those attacks, and that's true of thousands of troops here, to the Chinook pilot who'd just taken British troops into battle, who said he was still motivated by anger and by revenge, to the brigade commander here who lost a friend in the Pentagon on September the 11th, who told me it's personal and for him it's still very necessary. Well, necessary it may be, but this is not a war that is going well. More than 730 American troops killed, and of course thousands of Afghans. Last month, the worst month for American casualties. And the overall commander, General Stanley McChrystal, saying the situation is deteriorating and that this is a war that could be lost. So there will be many more anniversaries of September the 11th before this flight line is absolutely quiet and before the American troops can leave Afghanistan.
Bill Neely there in Afghanistan, and now NBC reporter Michelle Franson at Ground Zero in New York. Michelle, these ceremonies that like the one you're standing at now, very poignant still, even after 8 years.
Yeah, they're still considered very poignant, especially for families here, which is this sacred burial site. Many of the victims' remains were never recovered from this area, so it's very important for them to be able to have a place to come and remember their loved ones, a place where they can feel connected on this day. And as you can see, the Ground Zero construction site is far from being finished. The buildings are not expected to be completed until at least 2013. A permanent memorial and museum not until 2012, so it's still several years off before the family members will have a place to come to, not only on 9/11.
OK, Michelle Franson there at Ground Zero in New York. Thank you very much indeed. A soldier who risked his life to recover a fallen comrade from the battlefield